I can't remember the last time I slept in peace. All I recall is lying on my bed, staring at the dark ceiling, waiting for sleep the way a drowning man waits for a piece of driftwood. But sleep never comes. Instead, something else does. Something I cannot describe precisely, yet it feels like a presence watching me from the corner of the room. The room is dark, the heavy curtains block any light from the street outside, and yet I feel utterly exposed, as though invisible eyes are fixed on me from within the folds of the shadows. The silence is suffocating, so heavy that even the sound of my own breathing feels strange, uneven, as though I'm inhaling air too dense to bear. On the nightstand, the clock's hands glow faintly with a sickly phosphorescent green. 2 o'clock after midnight. Its hands move slowly, and with every tick, I hear the sound echo inside my skull. Tick, tick, tick. It wasn't just a clock. It was a countdown to something drawing closer with every second. I tried to close my eyes, but the moment I did, I heard them. The whispers. Faint at first, like a breeze slipping through cracks in the wall, then clearer. Several voices at once, speaking in a language I couldn't understand, yet I knew they were speaking about me. I snapped my eyes open, scanning the room, but nothing had changed. Everything was in its place. The wardrobe, the desk, the chair, the mirror on the wall. Still, my heart pounded as though I was being hunted. Slowly, I got out of bed, my legs trembling as they touched the cold floor. I walked toward the mirror, maybe to convince myself it was all in my head. But I wished I hadn't. At first, the reflection was normal. My pale face, my bloodshot eyes from sleepless nights, my messy hair. But when I leaned closer, I noticed something behind me. In the mirror only, behind my left shoulder, there was a shadow. A tall shadow. So tall, its head seemed to stretch beyond the ceiling. It had no features, except for two glowing white eyes. I spun around instantly. Nothing, just the plain wall. But when I looked back into the mirror, the shadow was still there, closer this time. A chill spread through my veins. I couldn't move. All I could do was stare at the mirror. And then it happened, the thing that froze my heart completely. My reflection smiled. Yes, my own reflection smiled while my real face remained frozen in horror. I stumbled backward, crashing against the bed. When I lifted my eyes again, everything was normal. Just my reflection staring back. No shadow, no glowing eyes, no smile. I pressed my face against my hands, gasping, trying to convince myself it was nothing but hallucinations brought on by exhaustion. But then the voice returned. This time, it wasn't a whisper. It was a clear, hushed command. Don't sleep. My blood turned to ice. I looked around wildly. Who said that? Was it coming from the walls? The floor? My mind? I couldn't tell. The word repeated again, deeper this time, as though spoken from within my own chest. Don't sleep. My limbs shook uncontrollably. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my phone and switched on the flashlight. The light cut through the darkness, dispelling part of the terror, but not all of it. The room looked normal. Almost. But in the upper corner, where the wall met the ceiling's shadow, I swear I saw something moving, something crawling slowly along the wall, as if the darkness itself had taken on a living shape. I threw the blanket over myself and sat rigid on the bed. I didn't dare turn off the light, even as my phone's battery began to drain. My heart hammered against my ribs, my eyelids grew heavier from exhaustion, but I couldn't close my eyes. I didn't dare sleep. And yet, at some point, I drifted off. Just for a moment. Just one.
But in that moment, I dreamed. I was in the same room, but everything was reversed. The walls were black, the furniture upside down, the mirror hanging from the ceiling. In the center of the room stood the shadow, taller, thicker, closer. It reached out its hand toward me, a long, thin hand with more than 5 fingers, crooked like dried branches. I woke up screaming, drenched in sweat, the air around me thick like smoke. I looked at the clock, 3 a.m. But what nearly drove me insane was that I didn't wake up alone. There was another sound in the room, a faint, broken laugh, rasping, like it came from a shattered throat. The echo of that laugh did not fade from my ears, not even after I switched on the main light in the room. The glow flooded every corner, yet I felt no comfort. On the contrary, it seemed as though the shadows in the corners had thickened, retreating only to lurk in the darkness behind the light. I sat at the edge of the bed, panting, eyes darting wildly around. The room was utterly silent, save for the faint buzzing of the neon bulb above, and yet a heavy sensation pressed against my chest, the sense that I was not alone. I tried to convince myself that everything I'd experienced was nothing but hallucinations born of insomnia. But how could I explain the laugh? How could I explain the way it rang out, clear, deep, filling the entire room? I found myself moving toward the wall opposite my bed. I didn't know why. Slowly, I pressed my ear against it. I expected silence, but what I heard was not silence. It was a whisper. At first, it resembled a distant humming, as though someone were speaking from an abyss, but the longer I listened, the clearer the words became. Many voices, layered and tangled, all speaking at once. Some were deep, others sharp, some like children's. I couldn't grasp the meaning, but I realized one thing. The whispers were coming from inside the wall. I staggered back, trembling, my spine hitting the wardrobe. Suddenly, the sound vanished, as though the wall had swallowed everything whole. I breathed deeply, trying to steady myself. But just as calm began to return, something happened that shattered me all over again. This time, the whispers didn't come from the wall. They weren't beneath my floor. They were in the hallway itself. Fragmented words reached my ears, clearer than ever before. He does not sleep. He sees us. Soon. Ice flooded my veins. I spun left, then right. Nothing. The corridor was empty. Yet the voices lingered, echoing endlessly in my head. Suddenly, the swaying bulb flickered, then went dark. For a few seconds I was swallowed in absolute blackness, and in that short span of darkness I saw them. It wasn't a dream this time. My eyes registered them clearly. Tall, shapeless figures of black mist shifting in the corridor, many of them, long-limbed, faceless, advancing toward me in silence. I screamed and bolted back into my room, slamming the door shut, pressing my back against it as I trembled violently. Thank God the light was still on inside. But I knew that if I turned it off, I would not be alone anymore. I slid down to the floor, hugging my knees to my chest. Tears streamed down my face before I even realized it. I hadn't cried in years, but the terror was beyond anything I could endure. And then I heard it again. The whisper. But this time it wasn't in the walls, or beneath the floor, or in the hallway. It came from inside the room. I froze. The sound was sharp, unmistakable, right behind my ear, as though someone leaned over my shoulder and breathed a single word. Sleep. I didn't dare turn around. I didn't even dare move. But from the corner of my eye, I saw it. The shadow crawling across the floor. A long, impossibly long shadow stretching out from beneath the bed, inching toward me. I screamed and screamed and screamed, but no one answered.
I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the chair by the window until morning broke, my eyes half shut from exhaustion, but my mind sharper than it should ever be. Every time I tried to close my eyes, even for a few seconds, I'd hear the whispers return or feel a shadow creeping closer. With the first light of dawn, it felt as though the room exhaled. The shadows retreated into the corners, and the whispers vanished as if they had never been. I let out a long breath of relief, but deep down I knew this was only a truce. Night would return, and with it, everything else. I stepped out of the room and into the kitchen. I brewed a cup of black coffee, my hands trembling as I filled the cup. I sat down, sipping slowly, trying to reclaim some calm. But my eyes burned from sleeplessness, and my body felt like it was collapsing little by little. About an hour later, I heard a faint knock at the door. I hesitated for a moment, then slowly rose to open it. There she was, an old woman, short and hunched, dressed in a loose black gown and a faded headscarf. Her eyes were sunken, yet there was a strange gleam in them, as though she knew more than she should. She gave me a faint smile and spoke in a raspy voice. "Good morning, son. Forgive me if I disturbed you." I froze in place. I had never really interacted with my neighbors. I barely knew their faces. I'd only seen this woman once or twice in the hallway. I never expected her to visit me. "Good morning. Is there something I can help you with?" She tilted her head slightly and answered, "You sounded like you needed help last night." I felt the blood drain from my face. I hadn't expected anyone to hear me. Forcing a nervous smile, I replied, "Sorry, just a nightmare." The old woman slowly shook her head, then looked straight into my eyes and said, "They are not nightmares, son. This house does not let anyone sleep." My heart skipped a beat. I instinctively stepped back into the apartment, but the old woman raised her hand as if to reassure me. "Don't be afraid. I don't wish to harm you. I only came to warn you." Without invitation, she sat on an old chair near the door, as though she already knew she was welcome despite my fear. Her pale eyes wandered over the room before she spoke again. "I've lived in this building for more than 30 years. I've seen many people move into this apartment." She paused, gauging my reaction, then lowered her voice. "And not one of them could sleep." I sat opposite her, stunned. I tried to laugh it off, to deny it, but the words betrayed me. All I could manage was a whisper, "What do you mean?" The old woman gave me a sad smile and said, "Everyone who lived here suffered from insomnia. At first, they think it's a minor illness, but with time, They begin to hear voices, to see things. Then, they either flee the place in terror or they vanish without a trace. My hands trembled. Memories of the past nights rushed back, the whispers, the shadows, the mirror. Desperation rose in my voice. Vanish? What do you mean by that? She answered, There is something in this house, something ancient. It doesn't sleep, and it doesn't allow anyone else to sleep. It feeds on their wakefulness, on their fear, on their minds as they weaken with every sleepless night. I felt like I was suffocating. I clutched my head in my hands and whispered in a broken voice, But I don't want to disappear. I don't want to lose my mind. Her frail hand rested on my shoulder and said, You still have time, but you must understand. For you, sleep is no longer a choice. If you sleep, it sees you. If you stay awake, it draws closer. I stared at her wide-eyed. Then what should I do? The old woman lowered her gaze for a moment, then spoke. There is only one way, but you won't like it. She fell silent for a long time. She didn't need to continue. Her words had already planted a new terror inside me. Then slowly, she rose and made her way to the door. Before leaving, she turned back, her voice firm. If you hear the walls whisper tonight, do not answer. No matter what happens, do not respond. Because if you do, it will speak to you directly. And with that, she left, leaving behind a silence heavier than any sound. I stood frozen, breathing slowly, a single question echoing endlessly in my mind. And what if I did speak to it? The next day, I couldn't stay in the apartment any longer. I felt as if the walls were watching me, and every shadow moved when I did. I remembered the old man's words about those who lived there before me, those who had disappeared. I couldn't ignore them anymore. So I decided to visit a doctor specialized in sleep disorders. Maybe I'd find an explanation, or at least some reassurance that what I was experiencing was an illness that could be treated, not a curse. The clinic was inside an old building in the middle of the city, its walls painted a faded gray. The iron staircase groaned with every step. A young secretary with a tired smile welcomed me, then led me to the doctor's office. Behind the desk sat a man in his 50s, nearly bald, with thick glasses and a calm face that inspired a strange kind of trust. He introduced himself as Dr. Fuad, a specialist in sleep medicine. He began with routine questions. How long had I been suffering from insomnia? Any family history? Did I take stimulants or medication? I answered hoarsely, trying to hide the tremor in my voice. But when I mentioned the whispers, the shadows, and the mirror, I saw something flicker in his eyes. It wasn't mockery. It was concern. I want to run a test tonight, he said. You'll stay in a monitoring room while we connect you to machines that record brain activity, heart rate, and breathing. We'll also film you with night cameras. It's simple. Don't worry. I agreed immediately. I was desperate for proof, any proof, that I wasn't insane. That evening, I returned to the clinic. They led me into a small room with a white bed and a large machine sprouting dozens of wires. Electrodes were fastened to my head and chest, and a camera was fixed in the corner. Everything was ready. Try to sleep normally, the doctor said before leaving me. We'll be watching from the next room. I lay down on the bed, although the word normally no longer existed in my dictionary. The room was dark, except for a faint blue glow. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to relax. At first, everything was quiet, but after only a few minutes, the air grew heavy, just like in my apartment. My limbs grew cold, and the whispers began to seep through the walls. I reminded myself that everything was being recorded now. If something happened, I would see it later, but the fear was stronger. I don't know how much time passed. Suddenly, a crushing weight pressed down on my chest. Something was sitting on me. I tried to open my eyes, but couldn't. I was awake, but paralyzed. I heard breathing. Hot, broken, foul, right against my face. And then the voice came, the same voice that had warned me not to sleep. "Don't sleep." I screamed inside my head, but no sound came out. I struggled, powerless. Then, just as suddenly, it ended. I felt myself released. I bolted upright, drenched in sweat, gasping for air. A few minutes later, the doctor entered with a nurse. He looked at me with genuine concern. "Is everything all right?" I screamed. "He was here. He sat on my chest. I heard him." The doctor didn't reply. Instead, he asked me to follow him. He led me into the monitoring room, where screens showed the video footage and the graphs from the machines. He started the video. At first, it was just me lying there calmly, nothing strange. But around the 15th minute, things changed. My body began to thrash violently, as if resisting something unseen.
My chest was sinking, just as though someone truly was sitting on it. And then came the moment that froze my blood. On the screen, directly behind the bed, a black shadow appeared. Tall, thin, faceless. It wasn't clear, but it was there. And when it leaned over my face, I saw its eyes, glowing white, just like in my mirror. I staggered back, trembling. I looked to the doctor, expecting denial, expecting him to say it was a camera glitch, but his face was pale, his hand shaking as he stopped the video. What is that?" I cried. He was silent for a long time before finally saying, "This isn't natural. I've never seen anything like it. The machines also recorded something abnormal. Your brain activity spiked beyond human limits at that moment, and the room temperature dropped 5 degrees instantly, though the air conditioner never changed." The ground seemed to shift beneath me. I had proof now, but proof didn't bring relief, only deeper terror. The doctor placed a hand on my shoulder and whispered, "My advice? Stay away from that place, your apartment. There is something there that must not be disturbed." But deep inside, I already knew. It wasn't just about the apartment anymore. It was about me. The shadow had found me, clung to me. Even if I ran, it would follow. I left the clinic feeling exposed, as if every passerby could see the truth in my eyes. Every shadow between the buildings stretched longer than it should, and the whispers, they hadn't left me. I could still hear them, even in daylight.
I returned to my apartment that night with dragging steps. I didn't want to come back, but I had nowhere else to go. On every street I passed, in every shadow beneath a street lamp, I felt those white eyes watching me. In the end, I thought, if I'm going to perish, then let it at least be in my own place.
I unlocked the door carefully, as if stepping into the mouth of a sleeping beast. The hallway was darker than usual, even after I flicked the light switch. The ceiling bulb flickered weakly, gasping on and off like it was dying. I stepped inside, closed the door behind me, and stood there, listening. Silence, but not a natural silence. It was heavy, swollen, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for me. I moved into the living room. Things weren't where I had left them. The chair I had placed by the window yesterday now stood closer to the table. Several books had fallen from the shelf onto the floor. Maybe I'd been too tired to notice before, but something deep inside whispered, no, it wasn't like this. I brewed myself some coffee to keep awake. As I set the cup on the table, I felt the floor tremble faintly beneath my feet, as if the whole building was breathing. I froze, straining to hear, and then I caught it. A low, muffled sound, a pulse, a heartbeat, as though the house itself had a living heart inside its walls. My eyes lifted to the wallpaper, and I swear I saw it swell for a moment, then contract, like a lung inhaling and exhaling. I pressed my hand against it, trembling. It was warm. I staggered back quickly. My cup shattered on the floor, but I didn't look down. My eyes were fixed on the small mirrors hanging on the opposite wall. My reflection wasn't mine anymore. My face was there, but the eyes were hollow, and the mouth stretched open in a silent scream, even though my own lips were clamped shut. And behind the reflection, a shadow stood. Not just in the mirror, in the room. The lights went out suddenly. Darkness swallowed me whole. But I wasn't alone. I heard chairs scraping across the floor, sliding by themselves. The table rattled. The cupboard door banged violently, as though someone inside was trying to escape. I screamed and lunged for the switch, desperate to bring the light back. When it finally flared to life, I froze. Every piece of furniture had moved. The chairs now stood in a perfect circle in the middle of the room. The table lay overturned. Every mirror was tilted at the same unnatural angle, facing me. I took one hesitant step forward, and the whispering rose in unison. You are ours. You will never sleep. I staggered back, shaking, but the door behind me slammed shut so hard it nearly broke my spine. I grabbed the handle, yanking desperately, but it was locked solid, like stone. That's when I felt it. Cold fingers, thin and bony, pressing against my neck. I couldn't see anyone, but the touch was real, undeniable. Slowly, they tightened. I froze, paralyzed, until I heard it. The laugh. That same broken, rasping laugh I'd heard on the first night. I exploded into a frenzy, pounding the door with my fists, shrieking to be let out. And then, without warning, it swung open on its own, as if the house itself was mocking me. I stumbled into the corridor, gasping. But it wasn't the corridor anymore. The walls had pressed closer together, suffocatingly narrow. Every light was out. Darkness boiled all around me. Each step I ran seemed to stretch the floor beneath my feet, lengthening it endlessly, keeping me from the end. Finally, I stopped, panting, spinning in circles. The hallway had no end. Behind me, the same black void. Ahead, the same. Then the walls began to whisper, louder, clearer than ever before. This house does not sleep, and it will never let you sleep. As I listened, I realized the walls were moving. Cracks split open like tiny mouths. From them slid out thin black fingers, groping the air, reaching for me.
I screamed again and ran. I don't know how I finally reached my bedroom door, but I slammed it shut and shoved chairs and the table against it. I collapsed on the floor, shivering, my hands clamped over my ears to block out the whispers. But they were inside me now. The house never left me, not for a moment. Even when I squeezed my eyes shut in despair, I saw its shadows moving behind my eyelids. It was clear to me then. The house was no longer just a place. It had become alive, and I was its prey. I woke up in the morning, if it was morning at all, still sitting on the floor. I hadn't slept, I couldn't, but I drifted in and out of strange moments, caught between waking and dreaming, as if stuck in a place that didn't belong to time. When I opened my eyes, pale light seeped through the window. It wasn't warm daylight, it was weak, sickly, like the glow of something ill. The furniture remained in its twisted arrangement, overturned chairs, the table tilted, but there were no whispers now, no black fingers reaching for me. I sat still, breathing heavily, trying to convince myself I was still sane. As I began tidying the room, I noticed something odd beneath the old wardrobe. A piece of wood was sticking out slightly. I knelt down and carefully pried it loose. Hidden beneath was a small box, thickly coated in dust. My heartbeat quickened as I pulled it free. The box was locked, but the metal was rusted and fragile. With one strike of a broken tool, it snapped open. Inside were yellowed sheets of paper, crumbling at the edges, stained with dark blotches that looked disturbingly like dried blood. My hands trembled as I lifted them and began to read. They were journals, written in a shaky, uneven hand. May 3rd, 1952. I can't sleep anymore. The voices are louder. Every night they come into my room. They touch my face. They laugh. They told me the house will take me soon, that I'll never leave. I flipped the page quickly. June 12th, 1952. My wife is gone. She stepped out of the kitchen and never came back. I searched everywhere. The walls laugh at me. I saw her hand waving at me from inside the mirror. I tried to break it, but all I saw was my own face, my face smiling back at me with a grin I didn't make. Sweat dripped from my forehead as the paper slipped through my fingers. I kept reading. August 20th, 1952. I am not alone. Something lives in this house. It feeds on us. The weaker we get, the longer we stay awake without sleep, the stronger it becomes. Sleep is not rest here. Sleep is a trap. If you sleep, it takes you. If you don't, it drives you mad until you beg for death. My hands froze on the final page. The date was smudged, unreadable, but the words were carved into the paper with such force it looked like the writer had been screaming onto the page. It is not a house. It is a mouth. And we are only food. A chill surged through me. The papers fell, scattering across the floor. My eyes locked on the wall in front of me, imagining the little mouths I had seen opening the night before. But the worst part wasn't what I read. It was what I heard next. A faint sound rising from inside the box itself. A hoarse whisper repeating the exact words from the final page. It is not a house. It is a mouth. And we are only food. I stumbled back, dropping the box, but the voice continued, echoing, chuckling, relishing my fear. I clamped my hands over my ears, but the words burrowed through, engraving themselves into my skull. That's when I understood. The past hadn't vanished. The journals weren't just old words. They were an open window, a doorway for the house to speak through. And now it knew that I knew.